Look at that. It is a teachers union boss who looks puzzled in that photograph. This is Random Assignment. Thank you for joining us. And I'm Bob Bowden. That's Corey DeAngelis. And the woman in the previous photo, I think her name is Randy Weingarten.
Yeah, we should really give her an award this year for just stepping on it over and over again and fueling the fire of parents to support education freedom. It looks like there's another way that the teachers unions have really stepped in it recently, which we can talk about pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it is an ongoing debate between who has been the biggest leader or driver of school choice in the year of our Lord 2021, and it's between Corey DeAngelis and Randy Weingarten. And I would just say, Corey, that the year's not over yet. You still have a chance to try to win it away from Randy, but she is strong competition. I think you would acknowledge that. In terms of,
I have to give it to her. I've tried really hard to advance the cause for educational freedom, but you know what? She's not even trying, and she's really just helping parents find reasons to support allowing the money to follow the child. And that's a great
try
thing.
As you might to be as persuasive as Randy Weingarten in making parents realize how important their own decision making might be. She's tough competition, but I'm just saying, you say the year's not over. You have some time left. I wanted to quickly say, so we had a 2 weeks since our last show, and I wanted to say that's because I got coronavirus. I got it about 2 weeks ago, and it was the day that we would have done. That would have been 1 week ago. Never mind.
Well, yeah, you texted me in the morning last Wednesday. You're like, nah, we're not doing it today.
Yes. So what I wanted to say about it, I had some friends who, because I full disclosure, I chose not to get vaccinated. But I'm not anti-vax either. If I'd have been in a different demographic, I absolutely would have gotten the vaccine. And if I'd had specific health problems, I would have gotten the vaccine. So I'm not anti-vax. I just considered it. My analysis was this simple: 2 low probability risks, in my opinion: the risk of COVID to me, and the risk of an adverse vaccine reaction to me. Comparing 2 low probability adverse outcomes, I chose the less invasive approach. I'm going to do the less invasive thing because neither seems like a very high odds. So, but always believing there really was a thing called coronavirus, and people really did get sick. And what did I have? I essentially had the flu. I had a flu. I'd lasted 2 to 3 days of fever. My highest fever I had was 100.8. I had a headache really bad the first night, but then took some aspirin, pretty much managed it, and had, I would say weakness for 5 to 7 days. General, just not as much energy as usual. And that was it. So that was my story of coronavirus. It's very simple, because most of us have had the flu. If you've had the flu before with a moderate fever and some headaches and not much energy, now you understand what my experience was with COVID-19. So
now you're back and ready to rock on the Random Assignment podcast.
That's right.
Boom, ready to battle the unions once again.
Yes.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this. The picture here. It looks like there's a fork in the road when it comes to unions in some places, particularly in Florida, which I wrote about in New York Post in the print edition yesterday. The headline was "Teachers Unions' Mask Demands Have Gotten Them into a Catch-22 Dilemma." And what's interesting here is we've been talking all along about how the teachers unions have stepped in it, overplayed their hand by showing families why they need educational freedom and just showing families their true colors. This one's a little different. So in Florida, for example, Governor Ron DeSantis did an executive order saying that government schools can't force all students to wear masks throughout the school day, that the decision would be left to the individual families. The Florida Education Association, the teachers union out there, did not like that one bit. And so the response from the Board of Education in Florida was a unanimous decision to allow all families to take their children's education dollars to a private school if they disagree with their public school's masking rule. And that could go both ways, whether that's a mask mandate for all kids or whether that's a situation where you might not want to be in a school or have your kid in a school that does not mandate that all kids have masks. So it works both ways, and that really puts the families in the driver's seat. And this would work in Florida. It's going to work through their existing Hope Scholarship Program, which is a program for students who were bullied in the public schools. Now they just open that up to families who feel like their kids are being bullied by the decision when it comes to masking one way or the other. And so this puts the union in a very sticky predicament. They didn't want kids to be stuck in a school that didn't mandate masks, but now they also don't want to let those kids free to go to a private school if they disagree with the public school's masking decision one way or the other.
Here's what I'm confused by. Maybe you can help explain it to me. We all understand why the union doesn't want to allow parents to choose where to send their kids to school. We all understand that. That's been true forever. But why do you think they're going so hard on this mask issue? What is in it for the union to be so strident on an issue which is clearly pushing parents in the direction of choice?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One is that it's sadly turned into a political battle, and teachers' unions largely are run by people that are more left-leaning. So that could be part of it. But it's also, too, it could be some type of control thing where the teachers' union bosses feel like these are their kids and not the family's kids. They feel like their kids belong to the government and to the school system, which I think is an absurd way to look at society. And then 3, I think it's more of a cost-benefit kind of decision-making framework that they actually profit from the chaos that ensues as a result of fights about masks or anything else, because the teachers' unions can use the state of disorder as evidence, as leverage for bargaining with the taxpayers for more resources in order to return to a state of normalcy. It's hard to ask for more resources when everything is fine. But when people are upset with what's going on in the school system, I think they can use that as leverage to bargain for more extortion from the taxpayer. You want to get back to normal? We just need this, that, or the other. We need smaller class sizes. We need more people in the buildings in order to help with the mental issues that these things are creating. And so I think it's a combination of all 3 of those things.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. Of course, they could just go straight to that instead of this intermediate mask thing. And I do know what you mean. I think there is a certain kind of person, some of whom are friends of mine, certain kind of person who has just a collectivist sensibility. They just feel like if they're working in the context of a collective, it actually makes them feel good. It makes them feel virtuous, that they're actually in and of itself, just simply the act of participating in the collective groupthink is a warm feeling for them. So I do think that's a real thing. There's a thing where people just like the idea of collectivism. They just like the idea of socialism, of like, we're all going to do the same thing. It makes them feel like, look how generous I am. I'm with the group. I'm not out for myself. So I think there's part of that, but there have to be debates within the teachers' unions directly of just, I would call these, the more bottom line oriented teachers' union boss who just says, look, can we just like get down to the act of like preventing choice and keeping monopolies and get rid of this whole mask thing? It's a counterintuitive. It's counterproductive to our real goal, which is hoarding money and hoarding power. There have to be people in the teachers union who see how destructive the mask debate is to their larger goal of hoarding power. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. This is why the Wall Street Journal also wrote about this today. Bill Maddox over at James Madison Institute, I beat him to the punch. I wrote about it in New York Post yesterday, but he got it today or yesterday, and mine was 2 days ago. But his headline was Florida calls a truce in the mask wars. An existing school choice program lets parents decide what's best for their kids. And it's the same kind of idea. Look, the teachers unions thought that they could control the system for everybody, and then it kind of backfired. Like who was going to expect that this would lead to even more renewed calls for school choice being tied to the masking discussion? And it's not just in Florida. I saw a bill in Arkansas, Senate Bill 2, that was introduced. Same kind of idea. If you disagree with the masking rule one way or the other, take your children's education dollars elsewhere. We saw the Tennessee Speaker of the House voiced support of the same idea not too long ago. I think this was last week. Yep. Here's the tweet about it. He said, if the parents disagree with the school boards having the mask mandate when they should have the school choice, then they should have the school choice where their kids can pull their kids out, take their money, and go to any school that they want to. And we also saw an Arizona gubernatorial candidate last Friday, not too many days ago, called for a special session for the same thing, because they're seeing that although Governor Doug Ducey prohibited public schools from forcing kids to wear masks, some of the school districts are saying, screw it, we're going to do it anyway. And so I think the best response for these Republican governors is to say, okay, go ahead, but school choice is the solution. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't force all families to do one thing or the other, but you shouldn't force families to stay in your institutions either. And I think the best solution here is giving the money to the families. And hopefully there's more of these kind of calls to action.
Well, one of the big debates, of course, is whether money gets withheld from districts who go against. I think in your piece, you pointed out there are 10 states where they've said districts are not allowed to override parents' decisions regarding masks. The parents are the decision makers regarding their kids' masks, not the state, not the district. 10 states have ordered that, but there are these rogue districts, who said no to that. And it's funny, they kind of switch around. They say, oh, look, we thought people like Governor DeSantis were for local control and stomping on electrical control. No, parental control is even more local than school district control. But
That's
at any rate,
and one thing on that, there are 10 other states that about 26% of kids live in these 10 other states, like California, Washington, and Oregon, and Hawaii, and a few others, that have the governor forcing all kids in all districts to wear masks in schools, which the unions are silent on that. Where's their calls for local control when it comes to these other 10 states? The thing is, they have a policy that they want, and so they're going to use that argument against the red states, but not against the states with Democratic governors that are forcing masks on all kids.
Well, it's okay. So this mask thing, this mask thing has just been everywhere. It's been everywhere. It's dominated the news flow, but so much. We actually we posted a DeSantis clip that blew up for us on Choice Media. We have over 50,000 views in like 5 or 6 hours. So I wanted to start with that and just show what Ron DeSantis said yesterday about this issue.
We think it's ultimately the parents' decision. We think that this is something that intimately affects the health and well-being of young kids. We had a whole year to watch how this is developed in Florida and throughout the United States and throughout the world. And I can tell you in Florida, we had school districts that mandated it last year, others that didn't. Same with private and charter. And there was no statistical difference in terms of the cases. There was a study done by Emily Oster at Brown University, looked at New York, Massachusetts, and Florida. They found no correlation to forced masking and differences in cases. But you also have a situation where a lot of parents have come. They've come to me, they've come to the school boards and said, this has been very difficult on their young kids to have to sit there for 8 hours with this. It's not natural. It's never been studied what the effects of that are. You know, NIH has a $42 billion budget. They've not spent a single penny since COVID started studying how these mitigations affect kids. So ultimately, my view is it's a parent's decision. If you believe in the masking during the school, you're free to do it. No one's saying you can't do it. But if you're somebody that is concerned about that thinks that may not be the right thing for your child, then I think you should have the right to make that ultimate decision. And I don't think government should override that. So for me, it's about the parents, and it's about trying to vindicate parents' ability to make these decisions. But I think yesterday, Anthony Fauci said, we don't know whether it's harmful. We hope not. That's where they're at. So they don't really know. So this is a big experiment to have tens of millions of kids, particularly the young kids, that are going to be wearing this all day, the airflow, some of the other things with learning, particularly for younger grades when you're learning phonics and some of that other stuff. So there's a whole host of issues. And my view is clearly the data, if you look at the data, it's totally reasonable for a parent to say, you know what, I'd rather send my kid to school, without wearing the mask. So that's what it's about. It's about parental choice.
Boom.
Yes. Now, by the way, there's pushback on PolitiFact, I think, was saying, like, oh, this Emily Oster from Brown University citation was incomplete because it hasn't been peer reviewed yet. And so,
What's wrong with the data, though?
Pardon?
Yeah, but what's wrong with the data? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the data. I pulled it up when they were speaking about it. It's kind of small, but look, this is the COVID-19 school response dashboard at the Brown University's housing this data. They have been for a long time. They separate the data out for communities that have low or moderate transmission, substantial transmission, and high transmission. And you look at all these charts, the schools that had required masks within all of these similar communities had similar case rates for students and staff as the schools without required masks in all three of these charts. And I think that's the data that, in this one, in the high community transmission, the places that had required masks actually had higher case rates than the schools without.
I know they also criticize this for not distinguishing between places where they didn't require masks, but still a large percentage of the kids wore masks versus, in other words, it's not the requirement that's going to change the disease theoretically. It would be the mask. And so they would say, oh, they should have controlled for when it's not required, what percentage go ahead and wear the mask anyway. Anyway, the point go ahead.
I disagree because the policy in question is whether to mandate masks or not whether families are actually using it or not, because the policy in discussion is, do we force all kids to do the mask or not? Yeah. And so we should look at mandates rather than the actual choice of wearing the mask.
Yeah. Well, so Ron DeSantis in Florida is not alone, though, of course, as you point out in your piece and just did. There's all over the place. There are parents protesting this stuff. So I for example, in suburban Chicago, we found an example where local news covered this.
Let parents come and spill out your hearts that they don't even think about it. Just say yes, and that's it.
Parents in Homer Glen outraged tonight after their school board signs on to the governor's mask mandate for all students.
This was one of two suburban gatherings tonight where parents rallied to defy that order.
Natalie Bomke joins us now live in Studio 32 with more. Natalie?
Corey and Don, they say the governor can't legally force their kids to wear masks, but the Homer School District made it clear they have a lot to lose if they don't follow suit.
The governor's mandate is effectively law, and clearly, clearly eclipses it's not public participation, guys.
Parents upset. The Homer Community Consolidated School Board signed on to the governor's order, mandating all students, staff, and teachers mask up regardless of vaccination status. In Frankfort, outside Lincoln Way Central High School, dozens of parents voiced their opposition. The governor issuing the new guidance after a recommendation from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
We know that there's very strong data to support that even cloth masks, high quality double layer cloth masks or surgical masks or other face coverings that are not N95s can effectively prevent transmission to other people.
A downstate attorney filed a lawsuit alleging the governor overstepped his authority in issuing the executive order without approval from the State Board of Education.
Mandatory masks in schools, that's something that we've had before.
Homer board members saying tonight the district could lose state funding and insurance coverage if they don't comply with the governor's mask mandate.
So here's an example where the pro-mask people in a state, Illinois, Governor Pritzker says we're going to force masks. They're like, well, we'll lose funding if we don't go along with this governor's being forcing us. Whereas in Florida, they're saying like, oh, look how evil the governor would be to deny funding to a school district that goes against the governor's order. Because why? Because it's the opposite order in Florida versus Illinois. So it's a selective application of like when it's okay to withhold funding and when it's not okay. The point being, I'm just so had it with basically laws being made, without legislatures in this way, so to, force one size fits all anything onto a population because one person decides without a single vote in all of American history. Every law was voted on by some sort of legislature, whether federal or state-based legislatures. And yet we now have these new one size fits all mandates being just ordered by people. So I'm sick of it.
So what do you think about the DeSantis order that gave the power to the families?
No, that's the opposite of the one size fits all. In other words, I'm saying, yeah, like that, like it's to order. It's almost like ordering freedom.
Yeah,
is
that's
not the same
yeah.
as
I mean, I had a lot
compliance.
I had some libertarians that follow me be like, oh, why are you giving DeSantis a shout out? He's taking over local control. Well, this is a government telling you that you can have freedom and that the local governments can't take away your rights. I mean, that's a step towards freedom.
His order is to say other people can't order. That's it.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's like you could say, oh, look at that sort of government overreach. Wow, he's forcing them for the districts to force. Look, that's ridiculous. It's that when the order is another entity may not order, I don't consider that the same.
I mean, would you say the First Amendment is like an infringement on states' rights because it allows family to have people to have a freedom of speech? It's
exactly.
We better be against the
government
Constitution
from ordering speech. How dare you stop local government from ordering speech? I thought you were for local control. No, exactly. That's a good analogy, right? Drive all decision making. This is a principle, not just school choice, but in governance generally, that I believe in. And I think a lot of people watch our show do, which is just simply drive decision-making to the lowest possible level. You know, when you study organizational behavior in business school, which I did, like they talk about how much more efficient it is if you're running an organization to drive responsibility for decisions to the lowest possible level rather than some sort of top-down Politburo that decides everything and forces decisions down everybody, because it's just on the ground, individual people know details that the people at the top don't know about. So you end up with much better decision-making when power is distributed rather than consolidated. And so this is just in the same vein as all that. Just to wrap up all this, I wanted to throw in one more video clip about all this mask stuff. This is from Virginia. Excuse me. This next one is from Michigan. We ran the DeSantis clip from Florida. Just then we ran the Illinois clip. This one is from Michigan, and this is not just any school board somewhere. This is the state school board in Michigan. And I wanted people to see the kind of language that's being used about masks in the state school board in Michigan.
The emotional meeting lasted 3 hours, board members no less concerned, and the discussion between Vice President Pamela Pugh and Treasurer Tom McMillan became edgy.
You want to take the protection that they have away, you're killing our children. That's on you.
Oh, come on.
And let me say one more thing.
I'm killing your children.
Is that
what you just said?
Let her finish and then
is that
you
what
can
you
respond.
Said?
That is what I said. That's what came out of my mouth.
Oh my God!
You're killing our children. Corey, what is your response? This is a state school board member telling the vice president of the state school board, telling the treasurer of the state school board that opposing mask mandates is killing our children.
It's just this just hysteria, just this fear mongering is just continuing nonstop. I mean, look, we know that the risk of mortality for children from COVID is much lower than other groups. We have been pretty sure that that reopening schools hasn't led to community-wide transmission. We've been I'm not sure that there's substantial evidence. I haven't seen substantial evidence that mask mandates have led to reduced COVID transmission or definitely not mortality in students. So, and then the last piece is the families can choose for their own kids to mask their kids. This isn't a ban on forcing kids to wear masks is not the same thing as telling kids that they must not wear masks.
Wear 3 masks if you want. If you, I mean, like, it's at some point but that kind of language is, you do have to throw up your hands and just say, like,
he said, "Oh, come on,"
in good faith.
He said, "Come on." Have you seen that Reason TV video from Reason Magazine where Remy, he does the funny videos? I think he says, like, he was making fun of one of the lawmakers in Congress saying something like, "Oh, if you don't want my policy, you just want children to die."
Yeah.
And he made a whole music video.
Yeah.
It's just
right.
So hilarious. And it's the same kind of energy here. It's like, you don't like my policy, you just must you just want children to die. It's like, no, people don't want they don't want children to die, and you don't have evidence that one way or the other this policy is causing children to die. And so it's just total bad faith argument.
Yeah, it's a bomb throwing technique to try to embarrass and silence the opposition because you want power and you want to be seen as the person, deciding everything, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah, well,
this masks up is insane.
So one more thing I wanted to share on the mask thing before we move on is the report that DeSantis was citing by Emily Oster from Brown University and her colleagues. I'll just go to the abstract really quickly. The paper reports on the correlation of mitigation strategies with staff and student COVID case rates in Florida, New York, and Massachusetts during the 2020-2021 school year. Towards the end of the abstract, you can see they say, quote, "We do not find any correlations with mask mandates." And I thought it was funny that you pointed out, I didn't even know this yet, that PolitiFact or something did a fact check on Ron DeSantis for citing this study because, it wasn't peer reviewed yet. Even though the data are legit, and it doesn't seem like that's an argument with the data. And they compared non-mask schools to mask schools in Emily's study. But I wonder if PolitiFact did a fact check on this New York Times article by researchers at Duke University, where they said in the article, quote, "Because North Carolina had a mask mandate for all K-12 schools, we could not compare masked schools to unmasked schools." And the headline was this, quote, "We studied 1 million students. Universal masking works." Where's the fact check on that one? They didn't even have a control group. They didn't all they did was look at all the schools in North Carolina, said, the rates are pretty low here, and said, well, if they all had masking, so maybe masking had something to do with it, but they didn't have a counterfactual. They didn't have a control group, and that's a stunningly
misleading, biased headline. You found a big one there. Wow.
Yeah.
They might as well conclude, look, all the kids, all the children in North Carolina had a mask mandate. Therefore, masks stop prostate cancer because no children were diagnosed with prostate cancer. It's like it's just there's right. It's a correlation, non-causality. Right? They just said,
look,
well,
it's worse.
It was a mask mandate. So
it's worse than that because they didn't even have any correlation. There was no variation in the independent variable of mask versus no mask.
Yeah, you're right.
Like it's like the worst type of study you can have. You don't even have a control group. Yet the New York Times allowed these researchers. I don't know them personally, so I don't know if they did this on purpose. But the headline was just absolutely irresponsible of them.
Oh yeah, wow.
So, but I haven't seen a fact check on that one from PolitiFact.
Right. Well, so moving slightly away from masks, but still in COVID, I wanted to talk about an amazing soundbite that our friend Randy Weingarten gave about this idea of forcing teachers to have vaccines, whether you should be allowed to force the teachers to have vaccines. Because what she said, and this was live on CNN, she basically said, we're going to try to make money over this discussion of whether teachers are forced to have vaccines, because, they have been so pro-vaccine. They have been pro, at the time the vaccines were being prioritized. They said, teachers must be prioritized for vaccines. So they were arguing strongly for all kinds of vaccine support for teachers. But when this issue came up, well, should districts force teachers to have vaccines? Her answer was essentially, well, we'll try to make money on that.
If a city or a state, and it's not going to be all of them because there are plenty of states that don't want this, but if a city or a state comes forward and says, we want vaccine requirements for teachers in school, if they come and ask you that, will you say yes?
We are going to be bargaining over those policies. Yes, of course.
What's the bargaining?
The question.
Where's the negotiation in that? Either you support teachers being vaccinated or not.
Mm-hmm. You bargain over the impact. You make sure that people who have religious accommodations or medical exemptions, I'm a big believer in vaccines.
I know
and
you are.
Can see between the NEA and the AFT, that we have been more successful in our profession rolling up their sleeves and getting vaxxed than pretty much anywhere else in the United States. And so the voluntary approach has actually worked because it also creates long-term trust. So my point to you is that we're looking at these things right now. We think that because of full authorization, because we think that the resistors, a lot of it is combating the bad information about and the disinformation about vaccines. So we're in the middle of these discussions with our leadership and with our
Is there a deadline? Do you have a
membership.
Do you have a time deadline? Would it be this month if the FDA does give full approval? Even though you know there's no legal distinction between the two, but would that be a deadline when the FDA comes out?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold up.
Go
So I saw tons of headlines a couple of days ago saying Randy Weingarten supports mandatory vaccines for teachers now.
After this soundbite, people went crazy. She basically said, we're going to bargain over the subject of, meaning pay us enough and we will go along with this vaccine mandate thing. That's what she said on live CNN. People went crazy. Bargain about it. They're like, why would you need to make money off of this issue? And so then what you just cited is what happened next, is then Randy Weingarten said, okay, well, now we actually are for that. Like, okay, all right, now, we got so much pushback on this bargain thing that we're just going to say that we're forget about the bargain. Just forget about that. Yeah, I know that was like a number of days ago, but I got so much pushback. I'm going to forget about the bargain.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of headlines. Look, AFT President Randy Weingarten backs COVID vaccine.
But the mandate for teachers too, not just yeah, but in fact.
Yeah, there was tons of headlines on Randy supporting vaccine mandates, but I don't know if I actually believe that she supports mandates unless they can get something out of it, or unless
it's probably yet another negotiating tactic where she'll say this, say the next thing. It's almost like puzzle pieces, right? Where she's putting together some sort of confusing array of answers. And then whenever the time comes to actually sign an agreement, that's when new demands will emerge.
Well, and what wasn't that on MSNBC when she said something along these lines, the quote that she would support vaccine mandates for teachers? Wasn't even on that segment. Wasn't she saying something like, well, there's going to be exemptions and this and that? So is that really a mandate if you can just have several exemptions for teachers? And I if a teacher did not want to have a mandatory vaccine, I would be surprised if Randy Weingarten didn't come kind of fighting for them when it all comes down to it. I just don't believe what she says anymore, because every time she says something, you get up to that time and then things change.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's just the fact that she would say we're going to bargain. It's supposed to be a healthcare issue. It's supposed to be about that, right? And then she turns it into a bargaining opportunity, and it says the quiet part out loud. Like I agree with you. I think it's whatever she says today has no bearing on what she says tomorrow these days. But it's just that she accidentally said that part out loud.
So one more thing on Florida. I broke the news on this last night. I was the first person to tweet this out. We talked about how kids can have a scholarship if their family disagrees with the mask mandate or non-mandate in their public school. Well, Broward County Public Schools decided to defy the order of Governor DeSantis and say, well, we're going to mandate masks for everybody anyway. And then the Florida Department of Education, Richard Corcoran, signed a letter to the Broward County Public School Superintendent's Office and their school board members with a letter informing them that their paychecks may be withheld if they don't withdraw their school mask mandate by Friday. I'm not sure if you had seen this one yet, but this is kind of another way to stick it to the people that are making the decisions and preventing families from having that option at the level of at least superintendents of school and school board members.
Yeah. So one other thing about shots now, I mentioned a second ago the vaccines that with Randy. I was surprised to find out that there are districts now that are paying teachers to get a vaccine. They're paying them bonuses, not based on excellent teaching. That would be considered wrong, right? Because you can never, it's impossible until you can 100% fairly evaluate every single teacher. You should never evaluate any teacher, more or less, in terms of ability to deserve a bonus. But you can pay them to get a shot, even though nurses weren't paid to get shots a year ago, and no other, I don't know, grocery store workers weren't paid to get shots. Pardon?
Yep, I was saying grocery store workers.
All the rest, right? All of the emergency medical, right? But for some reason, they've decided not just the teachers should be paid a bonus to get shots, but in fact, of course, taxpayers who themselves are not getting paid to get shots should pay for other people who might be richer than they are. They might, in other words, a lower middle class worker in Georgia, in Henry County, for example, might be told, listen, I know that teachers already make more money than you, but you have to pay for them to get shots, even though you don't get paid to get shots. So this is an example of a Georgia district, Henry County, where this is happening, and we have some video on this. It's called Pay for Shots.
Our next guest has an interesting incentive for people to get vaccinated. Her school district is actually offering $1,000 to any employee who is fully vaccinated by the end of September. Joining me with more is Dr. Mary Elizabeth Davis, Superintendent of Henry County Schools in Georgia. Mary Elizabeth, thanks for being with me.
Well, thank you so much for having us and for the opportunity to really talk about the significant step towards vaccination in order to really move past this season in which COVID is really plaguing our communities.
Well, it's interesting, your word choice. You're using the word incentive and not a mandate. Tell me why.
Sure, that's right. Really, we are not requiring participation in the vaccine, but we have been on a mission as soon as vaccines were available to ensure that educators were first to have access. And now how do we continue making that choice into the most essential and effective mitigation strategy? Because we know the critical infrastructure that schools play and the critical role that our educators play in the lives of young people. So taking care of their health and really promoting those next steps towards a healthy workforce is really where we believe the investment needs to be.
So let me ask you, Mary Elizabeth, we've seen vaccination rates surge in states and cities that have enacted vaccine mandates. So why not make it mandatory? I mean, it would help keep our kids safer.
Yeah, this is really an opportunity for us to talk about how a combination of so many mitigation strategies, coupled now with the availability of a vaccine, is really the direction we need to incentivize people to move. We were open for 75% of the year last year, and we deployed all of the mitigation strategies that we know work. But this year, there's a vaccine readily available, and we've been on a mission since that was available to be a closed point of distribution. We actually provided the vaccine to each of our employees, as well as private educators and daycare providers. And now we are taking that next step to suggest it is not only vital that we make it available, but we want to move in that direction and provide that one-time pay supplement as an investment in you and your health.
So why can't the interviewer ask the kind of questions I'm saying? Like, why can't the interviewer just say, why should someone who makes less money than a teacher and isn't paid to be vaccinated, why should they have to pay for a teacher to be vaccinated? If it's in the teacher's best interests for their health, why do they need to be paid? They can't ask that question.
Yeah, and why did they fight so hard against going back to work in person, saying it was because they needed to be vaccinated in order to be safe, and then still not get the vaccine when it's available? I mean, if that was the true issue, this is why I think a lot of it wasn't about safety concerns. That it was more about, I get to stay at home and teach from home in the comfort of my home, and then they were using the arguments about safety as a reason why they didn't want to go back into the classroom.
At the time that they were passing all of these COVID federal packages, these multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar packages, they weren't saying things like we're going to use some of this money just to hand teachers money to be vaccinated. They were claiming that they needed this money for PPE and for smaller classrooms and all this stuff. They didn't say like, oh, by the way, we'll just start spreading around to this one segment of the population who chooses to get vaccinated when every other segment of the population doesn't get money for being vaccinated. They didn't say that then, did they? That wasn't coming up when they were debating these outlays, these federal expenditures and state expenditures. It's just we found out later, right? Joke's on us. We found out later. This is where some of this money's going.
And I wonder how effective $1,000 cash transfer would be to increase the vaccination rate substantially in places where the teachers unions or the teachers don't have high vaccination rates. I'm just not sure how much that would move the needle. And if it does, well, why do you need to pay for them to be incentivized to get the vaccine?
To help their own health. If this is critical for their own health. But by the way, they don't think so unless you pay them. That's the argument that's being made. It's insane.
So Randy Weingarten keeps throwing around a number, 90% of teachers in her union, which is 1.7 million people in the American Federation of Teachers, claiming that 90% or more are vaccinated. Do you believe that number? Or do you think it's higher, lower? Do you think
I think I would believe that. First of all, the AFT is the more urban teachers union relative to the NEA, which is larger and in more places. So I think of that urban core, they probably are more politically left-leaning, which tends to, as we know, correlate with pro-vaccination, policy or thoughts. So I would say maybe I believe the 90%. You don't?
So I told you I don't believe a word Randy Weingarten says. I'm not sure about this one, but I did see a recent article in National Review a week ago, which kind of this question of, do you actually believe this? And they cited numbers from New York City, which has a vaccination rate for their public educators of about 60%, according to the latest data from late July. And if New York City is a bluer place and their public school vaccination rate's only 60%, well, then how do you get to the 90% when if you factor in the less blue areas, you would think it would be lower than New York City?
You're right about that.
Which New York City's is 60%. And they cited Hawaii being, nearly 80%, that they had a survey in Hawaii, for example. Oh, no. This is not. I'll just search for Hawaii real quick. But they pointed out, about 80% in Hawaii reported last week that they had been vaccinated. And Hawaii, as we know, is a much more blue area than the general population. So it's
that's a good point. I mean, it's clear. I would think it's somewhat of a moving target, although it's probably the fast moving part is probably over, and now it's a much slower moving target, although still moving. But I mean, I got to tell you, I think we're now peering into not just phase 2. We're in phase 2. We're peering into the possibility of phase 3 with all this stuff, Corey. Don't you think that with each new variant, there'll be the the Lambda variant and the Omega variant and all these other new variants that'll come along either every year or twice a year or something, and there will be new calls for lockdowns, new calls for payments of teachers to go in for in-person anyway. There'll be new calls for new vaccines. There'll be new calls for mandates on masks and vaccines, and that this is kind of morphing into a new reality, a new normal.
It's a constant state of tyranny. And look, for the most part, the population allowed it to happen this past year and a half. That people have allowed the First Amendment to be put aside and allowed government to trample on our individual liberties in the name of safety.
Did you see what Rand Paul said? Rand Paul said, this is now the time to resist. He says they can't arrest all of us. It was amazing soundbite coming from a U.S. senator.
I don't have that soundbite, but I do have a video of Rand Paul from that same video I want to share. It's only 20 seconds.
Okay.
Where he talks again about this. We can't let this happen again. So here's the clip.
We won't allow it again. If a school system attempts to keep children from full-time in-person school, I will hold up every bill with 2 amendments. One to defund them and another to allow parents the choice of where the money goes for their child's education. Do I sound fed up to you? That's because I am.
Boom.
Yes.
I will hold up every single bill in Congress if you try to keep kids out of in-person instruction again. Fool us once, that's on you. Fool us twice, that's on us.
Yeah. No, and I just want to send you this too because it's a perfect dovetail to it. You can just so I'm sending this to you through Facebook. So
I'll look for it.
You have that link?
I'm working on it. Is it a video?
No, it's just a headline. I just wanted you to see the headline. It's because it's really how I feel. In fact, when I saw this, I was kind of gratified by it. I thought to myself, finally, so there's been somebody who is saying what I'm thinking.
I'm pulling it up. It's almost there.
We need a musical interlude.
Yeah, here it is.
Assignment.
Oh, speaking of musical interlude, Bob Bowden is an expert singer and piano player, and I had no freaking idea, and I've known Bob for years.
Well, please. Yeah, all the money I've made in music. No, when I was a young man in my what they call when I was in my 20s, I was in bands and stuff like that, whatever. Like
something that I have no talent with whatsoever. You kept trying to get me to sing.
You don't need any extra talent. You got plenty.
Here's the headline from Yahoo News. Rand Paul said they can't arrest all of us. Is that in the same video?
I think it was the same day, even though that photo looks like a different day from the one that you showed. I think it was in my memory. It was from the same speech that you just pulled the clip from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember hearing that in the same clip. I just took a little 20-second segment out of there. Yeah, I mean, it's tough though. Like when it's a collective action problem that everybody knows that the mask mandates and whatnot and some of these civil liberty restrictions are BS. That government should not be able to force us to do things in a particular way, especially when it's in our own households or in a private business. The problem is people don't want to be the one. You don't want to be the one person that does it and everybody else kind of looks at you funny. In order for it to work, everybody kind of has to be singing the same tune. That's when Rand Paul's call for they can't arrest all of us will work. But if it's only 1 or 2 people, yes, they can. And the other problem is private businesses. You don't really want to blame them for this. Like I went to my gym the other day. I went today too, and they're requiring mask mandates while working out in the gyms again in DC. Although the Mayor Bowser doesn't really follow her own mask mandate. She was caught at Washington Examiner officiating a wedding indoors, maskless, and that was okay. The first night of her mask mandate. Yeah. And the businesses just they don't want to face the financial consequences. So like from a cost benefit decision making standpoint, they just say, you know what, we don't want to get our license taken from us or whatever it is. They don't want to get the heavy hand of the state coming down on them. So they just kind of go along. And then as a customer at the gym, for example, I don't want to be that guy and like get upset with the owner of the gym because it's it just feels weird.
That's just probably an entrepreneur trying to make his way, trying to make a buck.
I don't want to put it on them either. So it's like they're the middleman kind of getting upset customers, and I kind of feel bad for them because the real problem is the government forcing everybody to comply with these orders.
Yeah, this wasn't on our rundown, but what did you make of the Cuomo resignation? I'm curious, Corey. I have kind of had 2 thoughts on it. On the one hand, like, I thought that some of his behavior, I mean, like, it's good to see him go in many ways, but on the other hand, it's too bad it was just about the women presumably, when in fact these nursing home orders were, I thought, far worse. It killed 15,000 people. And that seemed to be completely left off this ledger, which gives a free pass to people like Governor Murphy of New Jersey, who did the same kind of nursing home order that killed thousands of people. And yet that's sort of presented as if that's nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's also true that in the Cuomo de Blasio fights between the New York governor and the New York mayor, it was Cuomo who was more the charter school supporter, more of the school choice supporter. And so it's unfortunate if one of them has to go, it's the one who's the bigger school choice supporter. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I saw a lot of commentary like along the lines of what you were just talking about, how he had a lot of other crap that he did wrong in terms of.
Oh, he had lied about the data too. He all kinds of stuff. Yeah, about using.
I think he gets a pass on the nursing home thing from a lot of people, not everybody, but from a lot of people, is because they'll say, "Oh, he didn't mean it," or he was just trying to do something to help. And people are really focused on intentions, even if that policy leads to a lot of deaths of elders in your state. So,
well, no, but he also had an empty hospital at Jacob Javits Center that he didn't use because it would have given Trump credit. And he had an empty ship docked in Manhattan that he could have used. That was a hospital ship supplied by the U.S. Navy, but he didn't do that. So instead, he did this as a way to politically, it wasn't just he was trying his best. He sent COVID positive patients to nursing homes in lieu of sending them to federally helped hospital facilities because of politics. But then also other stuff too, where he had special friends of his, donors of his, got COVID tests before the regular public couldn't get access to COVID tests. He had state troopers like drive all the way from Albany to the Hamptons to do a COVID test on some wealthy donor and then drive it 6 hours back to Albany just as an individual. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. It wasn't just all well-meaning, I tried my best and I made mistakes and people died because no one knew what to do. It wasn't just that. But
I think he gets a pass from the media on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
But I was surprised he actually stepped down. I mean,
a
lot of people don't like to admit. I guess it just got so bad. It got to a point where it's so bad that there's no saving face for.
I suppose
Cuomo.
I was still surprised, but just like you said, I was still surprised. But nevertheless, I know what you mean. Obviously, it got bad enough he couldn't handle anymore.
So some good news from New York City was just reported in New York Post. I want to say yesterday or today. They reported numbers of public school enrollment since 2017.
Yes,
public
I saw
schools,
that.
it was a 5.4% reduction in public school students enrollment since 2017, and a 31.9% increase in charter school enrollment in New York City since 2017. That's huge.
Right.
That's a monumental shift. I wish I had the data for private and homeschool as well. I'll look into that soon.
And I wish I had the data to break down which of the three authorizers, the New York City can authorize charter schools, New York State can authorize charter schools, the State Department of Education, and also the SUNY, the State University of New York, can authorize charter schools. So three completely separate sources of charter authorization in New York City, for example. And so when you see data like you just showed, I'd be curious to see. If nothing else, it underscores the value in having multiple charter authorizers, which many states don't have. And so in some states like California, it's all the local districts have to do it, which is, McDonald's authorizing Burger King. In a state like New Jersey, it's only the State Department of Education, which if you have a governor that's not friendly toward charters, then that basically shuts down during that governor's terms. So anyway, so multiple charter authorizers is a good thing. And I think that's borne out into that New York data. I know we're running low on time here. I wanted to get to this one amazing soundbite from a Loudoun County, Virginia teacher who went up to the podium, and all I can say is how much I just love this teacher so much. So that's all I need to say.
My name is Laura Morris. I have been a teacher in Loudoun County Public Schools for 5 years and a teacher for 10. In that time, I have learned so much, being on the cutting edge of educational technology and working with a diverse population of students that I have loved. This year, I have the privilege to follow my amazing fourth graders up to fifth, and I have been excited about this all summer. On the other hand, this summer I have struggled with the idea of returning to school, knowing that I'll be working yet again with a school division that, despite its shiny tech and flashy salary, promotes political ideologies that do not square with who I am as a believer in Christ. After reading about your lack of consideration for the growing population of concerned citizens in this division, clearly evidenced by this empty room tonight, where you shut the doors to the public, as well as the emails sent by the superintendent last year reminding me that a dissenting opinion is not allowed even to be spoken in my personal life, going so far as to send a form to my colleagues and I encouraging us to fill it out if we hear one another speaking against the controversial policies being promoted by this school board and adopted in this county. Not only that, but within the last year, I was told in one of my so-called equity trainings that white, Christian, able-bodied females currently have the power in our schools, and that, quote, "This has to change." Clearly, you've made your point. You no longer value me or many other teachers you've employed in this county. So since my contract outlines the power that you have over my employment in Loudoun County Public Schools, I thought it necessary to resign in front of you. School board, I quit. I quit your policies, I quit your trainings, and I quit being a cog in a machine that tells me to push highly politicized agendas on our most vulnerable constituents, the children. I will find employment elsewhere. I encourage all parents and staff in this county to flood the private schools.
Boom!
I
School choice
encourage
now.
all parents to flood the private schools. And, look, this is just someone who believes in treating people as individuals, not based on their identity politics. And she's told not only that she's wrong about that, but she's not even allowed to express her point of view that identity politics is wrong. And so
we have a new
express yourself
school
there.
We've unleashed a new school choice advocate.
Yeah.
Jess Arnold, that's her name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have one more piece of news we haven't touched on. Oregon governor signs a bill suspending math reading proficiency requirements for high school graduates. So now in
yes.
Oregon, you don't need to know how to read or write or do math, and you can graduate from high school in the name of equity.
Yeah, you can almost hear the Pink Floyd song, The Wall, right? With the "We don't need no education" lyric from Pink Floyd.
Literally.
On that one. Yeah, I mean, I liked your response, though, on Twitter. You were just like, okay, well, I guess maybe you want to pick a school that actually does try to confirm whether graduates can read. Maybe you want to pick a school that actually does try to confirm whether graduates can do math.
Yeah, and I mean, there's two ways to fix this issue if there are inequities in math, reading, and writing test score outcomes. One is to lower the standard for everybody and just act like everybody can just pass through the system, which doesn't fix the underlying issue. Or you could focus on the institution and say, hey, maybe we're not doing a great job for the least advantaged students. And maybe if we do a better job, then we can improve equity that way. That's the hard way. So no one wants to do that.
Yeah. No, it's right. Just change the grading, right? That's it. Make the grading easier. Just, make murder legal. That way you solve the murder problem in big cities. Right?
Yeah, that's focusing on making the metrics equal doesn't actually fix the underlying problem. So yeah, but that's it. We're up at an hour, and I don't have any more headlines that I really wanted to hit on this week.
All right, it's good to be back on Random Assignment, everybody. Oh my gosh, I know 2 weeks just seems like a lifetime. But anyway, thanks for joining us on Random Assignment. Hey, please like, share, and subscribe. We probably should say that at the beginning instead of the end.
Both.
Huh?
We should do both.
Yeah. Take a visit at choicemedia.tv and see some of those daily headlines we post all the time. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys. Talk to you next Wednesday on the Random Assignment podcast.